Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News, and what a massive finish to the week it's been. We've got so much great news to get through in the crypto space, and we're going to cover all the macro headlines as well. We do welcome 500 new subscribers this week, so thanks for joining us on this journey. It was great to meet plenty of you at the Launceston meetup and also at the Gold and Alternate Investments Conference. Now, my presentation there was one of the best I've ever given, and I did record that in high definition, and we'll be sharing that on the channel in the coming weeks as well. So look, this week I'm in Melbourne for another stopover with some government officials and industry leaders, which is going to be fantastic. Hopefully I can take a few notes and record something there. And then we're in Adelaide in the coming weeks as well for the launch of another Bitcoin documentary, and I'm really looking forward to meeting the Adelaide crew. So plenty going on at the moment. Let's get into the local news, where in Australia we saw all the major headlines across all the different newspapers and news outlets online printing these blacked out cover pages. So look, when government keeps the truth from you, what are they covering up? So a few hashtags that have been going on, freedom of the press, your right to know. We've seen whistleblowers in Australia being thrown in jail and basically have no protection. So it's just crazy when you see someone like Edward Snowden, who did a fantastic podcast with Joe Rogan this week. I recommend you all check that out. Where this is all heading and why there's no truth in media. Look, obviously, even we're pushing the boundaries, I guess, with some of our content in what they deem to be legitimate or not. So big thanks to everyone that is supporting our channel and spreading the word. It's so important to wake people up to what is going on. Now, positive news in Australia, our pension funds, our retirement funds, superannuation as we call it here, has got some of the best funds in the world. Now, the reason for that is that we've had very strong growth in Australia, that record period without a recession, strong housing growth, the resources boom, and good demographics. So it's no surprise that we have some of the best performing funds in the world. But all around the globe, we're now facing headwinds, slowing economies, demographics, and whatnot. So look, it's just mathematically not possible to pay out all these pension funds and retirees, but I do recommend you read that report for more information. Now, into the cash ban. This has been topical for a number of months now, and I just wanted to say a big shout out to Tassie MP Andrew Wilkie. He spoke out against this cash ban, saying that this is trying to push people into the clutches of banks, and we know how bad banks are. Once we have negative interest rates in Australia, cash will be more important, and the real crime happens at Crown Casino and all the laundering and illegal activities that are going to continue to happen no matter what you make the rules. So great to see someone talking like that, other than us YouTubers and I guess outsiders. And if you don't know why this is important, I've done 2 videos on the cashless society, negative interest rates, where these global interest rates heading lower, where this takes us all, and why gold, silver, Bitcoin, and other cryptocurrencies are really important in this environment. So last year, Australia was at the top of the list in terms of the number of millionaires that have been lost. So Australia lost over 100,000 millionaires, and this is mainly because we had so many people where their house was worth over $1 million on paper, and now with the 10 or 20% corrections, they're below that benchmark. So it just shows you how much of our wealth as a nation is tied up in the housing market. That's why politicians are doing everything they can to increase house prices again. So this first homeowner government guarantee here, you only need to put 5% down. We also heard this week that certain lenders are now encouraging investor-only loans, saying you only need to put down 10%. And I spoke to a few of the lenders, my friends that are in the game, and they said, look, you can even get loans with 0% down and just, take out that collateral from your other houses and whatnot. So look, the house of cards continues to be piled up. It looks like they want to blow this bubble as big as possible instead of focusing on making the economy more efficient, better jobs, complete structural reform. It seems their only go-to here is pushing up house prices. It makes 0 sense to me. Now, one of the other things I've been talking about is the RBA, their playbook is exactly what's happened in the US and Europe. So they've backed printing more money rather than getting government and spending it more. This real tussle between either the Fed and Donald Trump, or even Philip Lowe and Josh Frydenberg here in Australia. It's the tension between, who's going to get us out of this mess? And it's a bit of a passing of the buck, I kind of see it as. So look, we've got low interest rates. I believe we're going to have to go negative as the rest of the globe does. And we're also going to ramp up that QE and money printing. And that's basically said that's the path that we're going to take. So, place your chess pieces as you will for what is coming down the road. Now, similar thing over in China where the People's Bank of China, again, injecting over $200 billion. This is the largest amount they've had to do to shore up the banks since the start of the year. So whether it's, the Fed or, everywhere is doing this, injecting money into this fragile banking system at a time when stocks are at record highs. What's going to happen when things get a little bit, more dismal, a few more headwinds? What on earth is going to happen to the banks when all their assets are now worth even less and they don't have the collateral to back it? So we continue to see widespread chaos. Hong Kong has really put a dampener on their local economy here with all these shops that are being trashed and banks being targeted, petrol bombs tossed at police. And Hong Kong's a pretty civilized society, guys. A lot of people, if you had asked them 12 months ago if this would be happening, they would have said no way. And I think people are completely asleep to it in Australia. And if these things continue to happen to erode our civil liberties in Australia, I actually think there's a high chance we could see some sort of pushback and rallies in Australia as well. So another thing that I am predicting. The protesters have also started to show support for other movements around the globe. So Catalonia, they're having the issues as well. We saw Chile this week pushing back against price rises on certain services over there. And panic mode in Lebanon now, where the banks are feared over 7-day closure amid protests. So where are you going to turn at a time when the banks are shut, when you can't get access to your capital? Gold, Bitcoin, become your own bank, take control of your financial freedom. Now over to Russia, where they're cracking down on the internet. So we've heard about the Great Firewall of China. But Russia are also trialing their, what they call RuneNet, basically creating their own internet. And the idea is to, protect from the rest of the world and disconnect their internet. But if you watch that interview, that podcast with Edward Snowden, he probably talks about this in greater detail if you want more information. But just that totalitarian control in every country now is really, really getting out of control. Now, Russia have also made a move by one of their largest companies, Rosneft, to ditch the US dollar. We know that a number of countries now are trying to evade sanctions by using, the petro, Bitcoin, other cryptocurrencies or stablecoins, gold, or even just their local regional currency. So less and less people are using the US dollar as the world reserve currency for settlement. And we've also seen even the Bank of England, one of the US's best friends, push back and say, you've got too many privileges from having the US dollar as a reserve currency. So this is a theme that's continuing. So in the US this week, we saw a 6-week-long strike from general manufacturing staff finally come to an end. This has been the longest stop for 50 years and cost them $2 billion. But everyone is feeling the pinch. So while corporations and stock markets are at record highs, it's the worker, the middle class, the lower class, which are really feeling that pinch and they're behind the 8 ball. And that's because of things like this, where interest rates are low or negative globally, and yet credit card interest rates have never been higher. So a few great charts here about the actual interest rates themselves, still hovering at 17% on credit cards in some regions, and also the amount of interest that consumers are having to pay just to pay down the interest on their personal loans and credit cards. So it's that snowball effect of once you're behind the 8 ball, there's no getting back in front of it. And something that I really advocate for is, if you can, don't go into unnecessary debt. Now, governments themselves are also going further into debt, so you can't quite see the bottom of this chart behind me here, guys, but basically 2019 is on track to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in terms of the budget deficit. So the Trump administration looking like they're going to spend well over $1 trillion more than what they're taking in tax receipts. So that total government debt now increasing by more than $1 trillion a year and accelerating. At the same time, we see stocks at record highs, as I just mentioned. The markets are so fixated on if we get that trade deal and if we can get lower interest rates and more cheap, easy money. That's all they care about. Markets are focused short term, and fundamentals, valuations, that's all out the window, as much as it sucks to say that. The Federal Reserve are clearly in stealth mode with their interventions. They're now buying treasuries as well as these repo operations. The final figure here that they injected was actually $134 billion in one day, which at the time was equal to the total market cap of Bitcoin. So when the Fed press a button, create that money out of thin air to give to the banks to help them from collapsing, it just blows my mind how little the Bitcoin market cap is compared to what is going on around us when people are going to seek the safety of a fixed asset in gold or Bitcoin, when people just stop playing these games that the Fed and central banks are pulling. Now, at the same time, we've got Donald Trump again tweeting at the Fed, calling them derelict in their duties. They won't lower interest rates. We need more stimulation. Look at Germany and Europe, where people have got negative interest rates, so they're actually getting paid to borrow money, and the Fed have just been too fast raising those rates. Then they did their backflip, and now they're being too slow. So unbelievable. Every week he seems to surprise us with something crazy. And we've got Christine Lagarde, who's the head of the ECB, European Central Bank. She's about to take over from Mario Draghi, and she's criticizing Donald Trump for tweeting, because obviously she would hate it if someone was tweeting at her and doing the same thing. So she's got a big job ahead of her. She's got to take over that fractured Europe. We see Boris Johnson calling for fresh elections on December 12th now, because this can keeps getting kicked down the road. But everywhere we look, we know that these European banks are the weakest in the world. Half of the world's banks won't survive the next crisis. And as I said just before, this is when things are good and stocks are high. What's going to happen if we have a deep, nasty correction? They're just not going to have anywhere near enough capital, and central banks are going to have to print trillions of dollars every day at this rate just to keep those banks from collapsing. And people aren't going to accept that. Just like we saw Occupy Wall Street, Hong Kong protests around the world, people are going to take to the streets when the Fed starts printing trillions of dollars to give to banks at a time when they've had all these bonuses and stock buybacks, and yet they can't even have enough reserves to shore up their liabilities overnight. So central banks are out of ammo. They can't drop interest rates 5% with interest rates already negative. People aren't going to allow them to do QE, and the head of United Nations now demanding immediate fiscal stimulus. So this is spending by government on infrastructure and maybe people's QE, where the people are going to demand that you got to give us money this time, not the banks. And then we run the risk of inflation, and then that's a whole nother kettle of fish, which I'll talk about if we start to actually get inflation and central banks have to raise interest rates to try and tame inflation at a time when everyone's got too much debt. So Germany, meant to be the largest, strongest economy in Europe, they've bought more gold for their reserves for the first time in 21 years. Add that to the list of Russia, China, all these other countries around the world that are madly scrambling to buy gold, and you start to see why, because they know what's going on. Now, in terms of gold in the short term, we had that magnificent rally, and if you've been a subscriber to us for a couple of years, you've been buying gold and gold stocks. We've been very bullish on it, particularly in Australia, and now people FOMO'd in near the top. And I made a video called, is now a good time to buy gold, where I said, no, just dollar cost average by a little bit each week, but we're likely to have a pullback because of how big of a run we've had. Now, just like we see in the crypto markets with all these leveraged traders, we see the same in the gold market. So the green line here, we show that there's 380,000 people leveraged long, betting that it's going to go up, and only around 94 betting that it's going to go down. So there's way too much of an imbalance here, and I think that's why gold can maybe keep correcting just in the short term, but that's when I'm going to be looking to buy. I think that's going to be another fantastic buying opportunity once this little correction after that massive run we've had is over. So look, guys, if you do want to start to trade a few, gold stocks, ETFs, the stock market, if you want to bet that it's going to correct or keep going up, you can do all that now on eToro. So they're coming to Australia. $100 of free Bitcoin is yours if you sign up. Get that 10% bonus on your deposit. Make your first trade. I believe that trade has to be greater than $10 in profit or losses, and then you qualify for these bonuses, guys. So sign up like you would to any crypto exchange or whatnot, and yeah, that 100 free Bitcoin is up for grabs for this month only. Now, one thing I just wanted to throw in here before we get into the crypto news was this tweet I did, and look, I'll be honest, this is something that I'm a big believer in. I don't talk about it much on the channel, but I was testing the waters to see if there's interest out there from you guys. So the vast majority of people believe that we're not alone in the universe, and more people, are refusing to take this mindset of we're the only people in the universe, the only life form or whatnot. So look, UFOs is a topic all in of itself. I know Pomp is doing a podcast on this week. There's been some really good cases in Australia over the years if you're interested. But the reason I want to bring this up is because it all ties back to technology. And this week we saw the US Navy patent these compact nuclear reactors and what they were calling hybrid space and sea craft, so they can fly through air or water. And this really is science fiction. And if you actually have a look at the individual patents, really crazy stuff here, propulsion engines, mass reduction, electromagnetic field generators, plasma compression. So look, if you've read about this stuff. If you're a UFO fan, you know that this is the theoretical technology that people have believed that UFOs have used over the years, and there's theories about whether or not the US have been trying to reverse engineer all those. But it is really crazy to me that the month after the US Navy admitted that UFOs are real and released some video footage, Google that if you haven't watched that already, footage of the chase of the UFO they had, and now they're patenting a lot of this technology. So look, something I might cover more on the channel if you're interested. If you think I'm crazy, let me know in the comments below as well. In terms of cutting edge technology, quantum computers, Google have been in the headlines saying that they've got this computer. People are worried that this is going to crack Bitcoin. In theory, if you could point this computer to mine Bitcoin, it could mine the remaining 3 million Bitcoins in 2 seconds. Now, I don't believe this to be true at all. Bitcoin can upgrade its algorithm if it needs to. If you protect your Bitcoin address, it makes you less vulnerable from being targeted to try and solve your private keys and steal your Bitcoin. So look, there's a number of things you can do. I still think this is years away from actually being a threat. And if quantum computers exist, every bit of information on the internet in the world is encrypted. So the people that have the quantum computer could make far more money and do other things, solving any bit of information and government and cracking any website in the world. So I think Bitcoin is probably the last thing on their list to target. Fortnite is now the largest game in the world. They've met up with the Bitcoin Lightning Network devs to bring out a cool new little game called Light Night. So a little video game. Check that out. More games, more people integrating Bitcoin and these Lightning networks, these second layer solutions into the real world. And we know that the gamers are very open-minded to online digital currencies. We've also seen blockchain ventures taking a stake in Engine. So this is one of the best projects in gaming that I covered in my gaming week. I own this one personally. I've done fundamental analysis on this for our members, and these big venture firms, when they come in and invest in these projects, it's very, it's just that affirmation. So last week we saw a big fund invest in Synthetics, which is one of my favorite projects. It's now up 1,000% since we covered that for members. And this just lets me know that, yes, with our fundamental analysis, we do get some wrong from time to time, but we've had a number of winners that are vastly outpacing those losers, both in number and size. So XRP could be leaving the US, and this was a question that got pitched to, I believe it was the ex-head of the CFTC or the SEC around is Ripple a security? So he really gave a bit of a murky answer. They don't like to talk on specifics, but with all this regulatory uncertainty, people are looking to move outside the US. They're just going to get left behind, if XRP have to make this move, the Ripple company outside of the US. So we're going to get to why that's more important at the end of this video as well. Some of these countries like Malta that are just begging for money and innovation to come to them. It's these emerging market countries. And this week we saw Binance add a fiat on-ramp in Nigeria. So I've covered Asia, Africa, these continents with billions of people. That's where the huge opportunity exists for Bitcoin. Too often we're focused on what's happening in the US or Australia, and then we're just insignificant in terms of what Bitcoin is going to achieve globally. Now, I mentioned this one last week, I believe, but Litecoin Foundation have pitched that Mimblewimble protocol for extension blocks. So this sits off to the side of the main Litecoin blockchain. Mimblewimble is a privacy technique, and this is where I believe Litecoin is going to have its next wave of innovation. And again, for members, you got a detailed write-up this week on what I believe is coming down the pipeline for Litecoin going forward, and privacy on Bitcoin as well. Now, another project that was one of my favorites that's been a poor performer is Amisa Go, and they've really got back on track the last few weeks. Plenty of partnerships and releases about Plasma and their scaling solution. Head over to their Medium or their blog post to read about everything that they've been up to lately. But one that I believe is going to make a comeback in the next wave with other altcoins as well. We've seen Ethereum 2.0. I've done a deep dive video on this if you want more information, but basically in the future you'll be able to earn up to 10% annually, they're reporting, for staking your coins. So rather than the Bitcoin miners getting the rewards, the holders of Ethereum, if you've got it in your wallet, you'll be able to earn those rewards and keep the network secure. Now, if you can't afford 32 Ethereum, there's going to be pools that you can pool together with other people. I'll be doing information on those, particularly, again, in our members group. We might even put that together for members so we can all pool and earn those rewards together. Now, I put a lot of emphasis on sentiment, and I believe it's ultimately what drives markets. And we saw a real capitulation in terms of Google searches for, Bitcoin blockchain and particularly Ethereum lately. So lowest level for 3 years. Back then, Ethereum was around $6. With all that's going on in the world of DeFi and talk about Ethereum, getting futures markets and more investment products, it's the second leader, guys. It's not going anywhere, and they've got that big update coming in the next 6 months. So, look, I'm still a big believer in it. You guys know that I'm bullish on Ethereum, but we need to make that upgrade to really shore things up and keep everyone confident with all their dApps and the DeFi that they've got on the Ethereum network at the moment. Now, Ethereum are targeting December 4th for that Istanbul hard fork. This is happening on the main Ethereum chain, and this is not the Ethereum 2.0, the proof of stake chain. This is the actual Ethereum network as it currently stands. They still want to make upgrades and improvements to its efficiency before they worry about Ethereum 2.0. And again, please search Ethereum 2.0 Nuggets News on YouTube if you haven't watched that already. It's probably the most important thing coming up other than the Bitcoin halving in the next 12 months. Now, an $18 billion data firm is using XDAI sidechain. So you've all probably heard of DAI, the stablecoin. The XDAI is a sidechain that allows for these payments. So stablecoins have really garnered attention for their ability to make payments without the volatility, but also with low fees, near instant time because of these side chains that take on properties like the Lightning Network. Side chains are slightly different again, but these big firms are recognizing this technology and using this stuff. It's no longer just theoretical. Another big bit of good news we got this week was from Powerledger, who have actually been invited to Capitol Hill. So great to see them presenting around their renewable energy project. I keep pushing back this interview because they seem to have so many announcements and I want to cover everything they've been doing all at once. But yeah, certainly a project that we plan on having back on the channel soon. And you guys have sent me some great questions around what you want to see there. But the real action on Capitol Hill this week was Mark Zuckerberg. So the US have introduced a bill possibly classifying stablecoins as securities. That's going to be really interesting for not only all the US-backed stablecoins, but the decentralized stablecoins. And it's going to call into question whether or not you can, issue, a warrant for a company that is fully decentralized, like Maker or like Synthetics, compared to what's going on with these US-based stablecoins and Libra. Now, obviously, Libra and Mark Zuckerberg got put through the ringer this week. I did an entire video about that during the week if you want more information. But look, Mark Zuckerberg himself saying that he would quit Libra if the network got launched without Facebook. He also said that Facebook will have the ability to freeze transactions for nefarious activities. At the same time, he's saying that, anyone can actually build on Libra, but not the Calibra wallet. So there's so many if, buts, and maybes. You guys know my thoughts on this. I don't think it's going ahead anytime soon, and certainly not in its current form. Over in China, we also saw Tencent come out and say that Libra would pose a serious threat to their digital payment systems like the Alipays and the WeChats, which are just used so broadly in China these days. I think China would block them. I think Russia's going to block them. We know a number of European countries are already going to block them. So look, I just don't see Libra as a threat for Bitcoin at all. If anything, these stable coins and these payment networks are introducing people to the technology, and people are going to see Bitcoin as the actual store of value rather than that stable coin to make day-to-day payments with. So Jack Dorsey was asked straight out if he plans on joining the Libra Association, and he said very clearly, look, hell no. He is a big believer that Libra and Facebook should actually use Bitcoin, and he said that he is paying developers to work on Bitcoin and the Lightning Network for Square, his company. Now, this week, Square also put out the ability for people to own fractions of a stock, and then he tweeted, if stocks aren't your thing and you just want to stack sats and buy Bitcoin, just do that through the Square app as well. So those on-ramps, the ease of getting into Bitcoin these days, never been easier. That's why I think the next bubble is going to be the biggest yet. Now, DeFi continues to be the hottest thematic in the crypto space, and Binance have launched a bit of a competitor to Maker with their what they're calling Buy stablecoin, but they've also partnered with Chainlink this week to integrate with DeFi apps. So Binance Chain obviously doesn't have all the abilities of Ethereum, but they're looking to, extend the range of tools that they're offering to the Binance network and give more utility to the BNB token, which would be used to back loans, just like Ethereum backs those Maker DAI loans as well. So something else to keep an eye on there. Another fantastic announcement and a bit of an overhaul we got this week was from Aave Protocol. So these is a rebrand of ETHLend, which you might have heard talk about. So bringing a number of aspects of the DeFi world together, loans, tokenization, different stablecoins, a range of digital assets, and they've revamped their tokenomics for a token which really had been battered over the past 12 to 24 months. And as always, our head of research in our crypto community here, Matt Williamson, did a write-up a couple of days ago, and this one has more than doubled since this write-up. So congratulations to anyone that jumped on that one. You doubled your money in 2 days thanks to that research that's going on in our community. But the big news this week was Bitcoin surging 45% from its lows at one point this week. So what were those three reasons? Basically, we saw a number of Chinese related news come out, as well as Bitcoin futures expiring. We saw Bitfinex get some good news and backed volumes increase well and truly to a record amount there. So the first bit of good news was this thread, and I recommend you all follow CN Ledger, when President Xi came out and said, look, blockchain is such an important breakthrough, basically saying that we're going to go all in on blockchain. We want this innovation here. We believe that, cryptography, security, the world of online information can be secured by blockchain. And just 24 hours later, they passed their first ever crypto law going into effect in January. We were going to look to secure people's data through blockchain. So look, he did say blockchain, not Bitcoin, but sentiment that drives markets, this is a very different stance to their negative and cracking down on everything stance. And I believe that there's going to be some room for Chinese projects to boom now. So I'm a holder of Neo. I've got a bit of Ontology as well. VeChain I've got. Now, Tron is the one that's come out and said that they've got a huge announcement with a $100 billion corporation they're going to announce next week. I know Tron like to pump their announcements, and personally I don't own any Tron. Let's see what this announcement is though. Maybe I'll have to change my tune. But yes, I definitely expect that those Chinese projects have got more of a chance of being used and working with the government, particularly because the government can run nodes and they're not fully decentralized at this point, a lot of these projects. So I definitely think there's going to be some trade and investment opportunities in the Chinese-based projects going forward. Now, no surprise, we saw an incredible spike in WeChat searches for Bitcoin and blockchain, well into the millions, and this just dwarfs what is going on in the West when these people get an appetite for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. The second bit of good news that I mentioned just before was Bitfinex filing a subpoena to recover that $880 million that they had frozen by an offshore bank. Now, they raised funds and they launched their Leo token to cover those downfalls to make Tether fully backed again. But if they recover these funds, I believe that's going to be really good for the Leo token of Bitfinex, and I am going to do a write-up on that one for members as well. We've seen Bitmain announce that they're moving to Texas to build the world's largest mining facility. So people have often said that mining's too centralized in China. Whether or not you believe all the mining pools mean that mining is too centralized in China, but either way, big mining farms. I'd love to see one in Australia with all our surplus solar that we've got. But moving to Texas, a move in the right direction as Bitcoin's hash rate surpassed, I believe it was 120 terahashes. So price tends to follow hash rate, and if hash rate's at record highs, that's a good thing for Bitcoin's price. Now, Bakkt is looking to beat CMA in terms of launching options. So at the moment, we've got Deribit, where you can trade Bitcoin options. FTX, one of my favorite exchanges, is looking to launch those in the future, I believe, as well. But just the market is maturing for advanced traders, and I've done units on this in our group on how you can use options to your advantage. It's just great to see the market actually maturing there. Now, whether or not you want to believe that these options and futures and ETFs are a good or bad thing, look, I'm not really a fan, particularly if they're not backed by real Bitcoin. And when I hear things like this, the CFTC chairman admitting that they got together and launched Bitcoin futures to try and suppress Bitcoin and manipulate the price. Now, Bitcoin had gone from 1,000 to 20,000, so it was due for a correction. It's not like you can say that that was the sole reason, but I definitely believe in the gold and silver theories that futures and these sort of markets, which are not backed by real gold, and there's rehypothecation, 100 claims for every 1 bar of real gold. We do not want that happening in the world of Bitcoin, where all that money that wants to get Bitcoin exposure ends up just getting this cash and futures exposure. So something that I think that whales are very cognizant of, and when we see these huge weekend moves that result in big futures gaps, I believe that it's going to break the Wall Street markets. Bitcoin can never be tamed by Wall Street. So members get daily write-ups, and thanks to everyone that is in our group and continuing to support us. We've maintained over 1,000 members for over 2 years now through bull and bear markets, so you guys are loving the content. But last week I did a write-up about Bitcoin volatility and how we had a big move coming, and with everyone so bearish, it often moves to the other side. Now, 2 days ago, I wrote up this post with this chart here showing you my buy box, and I thought any dip into here was going to be aggressively bought. It would lead to a V-shaped recovery ideally, and with everyone calling for lower levels, it reminded me of back at $3,000. Now, some comments on my video last week were people that were selling and they planned to buy back at $6,000 even though they were selling at $7,000, which does not make sense to me. And we also had people capitulating, saying, I've been here for 2 years, enough's enough, I'm throwing in the towel. And the only other time I've seen that was back when Bitcoin was at 3,000. So it's funny how sentiment drives markets. You've heard me harp on about it. So if you want to join our members group and stay one step ahead of the herd and get all those daily updates and write-ups, head to nuggetsnews.com.au. You get those emailed to you every day if you're too busy as well. But a fantastic community that continues to thrive. So this week's technical analysis is brought to you guys by Bybit. There's a $60 welcome bonus there at the moment. There's a link below. That a trading platform that didn't get overloaded yesterday with all that craziness going on. I believe that BitMEX was definitely overloaded like normal, and I believe FTX had some issues as well, guys. So personally, I wasn't affected by that. My trades were fine, but I'll be talking to them as well to see what's going on there, and I hope anyone wasn't affected. And if you are going to trade, you can see today why you only use small amounts and you have to use stop losses, because if people are shorting at these sort of times when Bitcoin's gone down, that is when you're just asking to get burnt. We saw lots of people get liquidated. So please play it safe. Learn how to do this. eToro have got a practice account, if that's your thing as well, virtual account, so you can just play around with practice money there. Alrighty, so there's that buy box, and we've had this downtrend line, this triangle, and at the moment we've looked to have recaptured that. So there's a few things I want to talk about here. If we have a look at the entire move from the bottom at around 3,000, we touched the 61.8% fib there. Now that is where we were looking for the bounce with our write-up, and the other place that I just want to show you here that we've had another 61.8%, or it could even be a 50% here, is back from that high to this bounce and a little tag here. So guys, technical analysis does work. Now nobody could have predicted that it was going to be this big of a move, but with everything that's going on around you, when you put together the fundamentals, the sentiment, and we did have this this buy zone that we've been talking about. So if we just want to bring up our volume profile here, we've been talking about these spots where Bitcoin tends to, like a magnet, go to where a lot of the volume has been traded. So at the moment, we're sort of bouncing between these levels where a lot of the volume has taken place. We've jumped back up right to the middle of this pennant that was forming here, bouncing off this level. And I think we're going to chop around in this range between those two. Now, if we just go to the weekly chart here, one of the things I've been talking about is that increasing volume in that bull run, and very similar to what we've seen in the past 24 hours, that shorts get squeezed. All the people that thought we're going to go down here, it can lead to these massive squeezes in price and how quickly things change. So just like we've had that increasing volume, then we have decreasing volume on the correction. That's been very, very healthy. The other day, it was a little bit of a worrying sign. We saw volume sell volume starting to pick up. But now on this weekly candle that's still got another 24 hours till it finishes forming, this is what we want on the breakout from this sort of, if this is going to be seen as a bit of a bull flag or a falling wedge, we want increasing volume breaking out of it to regain the weekly moving averages, regain these daily moving averages. And now ideally we would come back and test that down trend line as support, which it's almost done perfectly here depending on how you've drawn it. I think we're going to wait for these 4-hour moving averages to catch up. Wouldn't surprise me to get another little test down here, maybe to 8,800. I think that would actually be a good bullish entry, and I think China have even rumored to be launching more crypto news on Monday at market open. So that weekly candle close now becomes extremely important tomorrow. We've seen a bit of a short squeeze. I believe there still could be more shorts that are trapped at the moment. And, what an amazing week of action, guys. Bitcoin never write it off. Everyone thinks Bitcoin is dead. It can never possibly get to these levels, and Bitcoin can't ever go to 100,000. Look at what happens, guys. 45% move in 24 hours. Bitcoin is going to be charging up thousands of dollars a day in the next bull market. And that's why dollar cost averaging is now the preferred method for a lot of people if you can't learn to trade and make money on these shorter moves as well. So guys, that is it for today. Head over to nuggetsnews.com.au for more information on anything we do. Otherwise, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share these videos around, and thanks for tuning in, guys. Cheers.